So. Well, hey, y'all, welcome to another Joffrey the Giant conversation. Today I have Marcus Pittman of LoorTV. Now, we're going to make sure that he tells you all about Lore. But basically, we want to be listening to this guy because we want to learn more about how to get Christian artists doing awesome things. The tagline for LoorTV is, Christian films shouldn't suck. If I've got that wrong, I know he'll correct me. It's my bearded friend, Marcus Pittman. Hey, Marcus, how are you, man?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely pleased to have you here. And we're going to talk hip hop. We're going to talk art. We're going to talk lore. Mostly, though, we're going to talk nice about Lecrae.
Yes.
The poor guy's in crisis because he tweeted something out recently that has, and quite rightly, ignited much furor.
So he tweeted out, just did communion at home with wheat bread and apple juice. I hope that counts. 8 years ago, he did a talk in 2013 at Liberty University's Convocation Center, and I remember watching that because I think we just started me and Chocolate Knox started doing work with American Vision at the time, and he did this incredible talk that just was about the secular sacred divide and how God owns all music, God owns all movies. There isn't this like Christian church version of art, right? Like God owns all of it. And it was it's still
Right.
really great. It's super good. And you just go from that to, well, I'm gonna, not be as theological in my music anymore. I'm not gonna be as outspoken theologically. And then now it's to where he's endorsing pro-abortion candidates, Democrats, and he's embraced social justice, critical race theory, and all this other sort of stuff. Doing stuff with Eric Mason and that sort of thing. And it's really discouraging because he had a bright theological mind, and I think he still does, which makes it all the more interesting as to why has he gone this way? And I have a lot of theories on that. It's all reach.
Yeah, I have a couple as well. Also, sort of presumptuous,
Yeah, but I would say primarily, I think one of Lecrae's biggest enemies, when he was rising up, was the Christian media industrial complex, right? So the same people that defined PureFlix, this is what a Christian movie is. The same people that define, these chords are what are used for Christian worship music, right? Like so those, I remember David was telling me a while back ago. He was telling me that in the Christian radio industry, they actually have a term called Jesus per minute, where the JPMs, where it's like if it's too much, they won't play it, and if it's too little, the audience won't recognize it as Christian. So they try to find that balance of like the theology, right? So
the sweet JPMs.
JPMs. So there is this corrupt, secular owned organizations that.
Well, hold on.
When I say secular owned, I mean
no. Well, I don't object to secular. Actually, I just want to, and I agree with you, but I want you to explain this corrupt a little bit more. What do you mean by corrupt?
So if you go to Nashville and you go to the Country Music Hall of Fame, you see the very first thing you see as you enter is this like glass case, and they have these really old hymnals from early country music days, and it talks about how Christian music and country music were just one and the same. Like that's really where it all started. So, and then that all came out of Nashville. And so what happened was, as country music started to talk more about like, bars and women and the honky tonk stuff, they realized that there was this conflict with the Christian audience and this, new pop country sort of thing. so they separated Nashville, and and Christian music moved 30 miles south to Franklin, Tennessee, actually where we had the Fight Laugh Feast conference.
Yes.
It's the Christian media capital of the world, is in Franklin, Tennessee. And so
Yeah, I think
and
Michael W. Smith lives there.
yeah,
Like just you know, just to
they all
prove
do.
that it's the capital.
That's right. Yeah, they all do. And so yeah, so that's where that came from. It came from an industry trying to create a different kind of media that would clearly separate country music, broad mainstream country music, from evangelical Christian music. And
I
so
think one of the results of that, though, is that it's not so much like in Lecrae's case, it's not so much secular industry gatekeeping. What it is the little cottage industry you come out of uh, denying you a platform, right?
yes,
What you're making isn't Christian enough, isn't what we do, and then
right.
so then there was a pipeline. They shut the pipeline off from inside, and so
Hmm.
that so there's a sense in which they're and I think this probably happens with the church as well with Lecrae, and of course everything Lecrae is doing falls on his own head, but it's important to understand the context that all of this is happening in.
Yes. And so uh so then you had this thing where you had this like early Christian hip hop movement with like cross movement and like Note Verbs, like way back in the day. And then of course Lecrae comes right around the time like MP3s are the big thing, right? Like, and everybody has an iPod, all this sort of stuff.
Seems like so long ago.
It does, yeah. But he was able, because of that, because of iTunes, because of all that sort of stuff, he was able to get really mainstream within Christianity, and not have to go through any of those boundaries that were set up through Franklin, right?
Hmm.
He was able to subvert all of that. You had people calling into Caleb saying, "Hey, play the newest Lecrae song," and they're like, "Sir, this is a Wendy's." we don't play Christian hip hop on our praise and worship stations.
Yeah.
So then Caleb started Air One, right? And then they allowed they brought in like all the Toby Mac and all the modern pop and stuff. That's sort of why that happened. So Lecrae actually built this industry. He really did. Like, I mean, props to him. And he did it by being incredibly reformed and theological, and
Yes.
he didn't compromise his lyrics. He was
Although
at the
I totally agree with how he didn't compromise his lyrics, etc. But I would object to your use of the word built. He powered the industry, but it's not like
yeah,
he went out and he started these projects that made him some more money, that enabled him to. So basically, by the dynamism of his work and the appetite people had for it, lots of things happened. But
yes.
he was not the one who actually constructed it. But and he didn't have to.
Well,
But
no,
there
I
would have
think
been benefit from that.
what would happen was the Christian music industry saw what was happening and was like, "Oh,
Exactly.
we need to get our hands around this."
Right. And so he powered it, I think.
Yeah, so he powered it, and then they went and said, "Okay, well, now we
Mhm.
have to."
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, we
Yeah,
have to chain it in,
of
rein it
course.
in. And I think that bugged him. I think I remember he was talking about how he would go and do all these performances, and it was just all white suburban audiences, and he wasn't really able to reach inner city Black communities, especially through the mainstream conference tour setting, right? Like that
Mhm.
they weren't marketing towards, because they have that 55-year-old Lifeway woman bookshopper, the same
Right.
problem that Pureflix has, right? And so like that's who they go after. So something happened where he said, and I think in that Liberty University talk, there you see him say, "Look, there is no secular sacred divide. God, the earth," he says this, "the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. God owns all the music. God owns all the movies. God owns all the art. He owns science. He owns all this stuff. It's incredible." And I think right then is where you see he's trying to say, "Look, I can be the best of the best, and I don't have to compartmentalize myself into this Christian music genre category, retail subject."
Mm.
So this 2 foot of retail space is where you belong in terms of how you make music. And he was fighting against that. And I think he was right to do so. I remember actually I stood up for him and it was like, this is the way he needs to go. And I don't know what happened after that. But somehow that, which was good and based on a theological worldview and this reformed tradition, became, critical race theory, Marxist sort of nonsense. Let's promote the black Democratic pro-abortion candidate because the black people in my community won't vote for a Republican. Like, it's just
Right.
weird nonsense. And to think about all he did without, because of the theology, I think.
Yeah. And I think
so
at this point, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying that, and that leads me to, his new album that he did with a guy named 1K Few, called No Church in a While, where they're talking about how really, that they have a church where they do gold teeth and like tattoos and like all this stuff. It's not really an actual church. And, I think he's lost that reformed orthopraxy.
Yeah.
He's abandoned. And so, and I still think, I still hope, I pray that, like, he's still wrestling with the theology of his past and what got him to where he is now.
Yeah, it seems like he is. I mean, he's obviously a very intelligent man. And so I'm not suggesting that this is by accident, but like what but I mean, we're not always fully aware of everything we're doing. And in that tweet he sent out about the Lord's Supper, there that you almost get a little sense of he is, in fact, he's not just joking. It's not for a rhetorical flourish. He is sort of uncertain. I think there is a sort of I hope it's okay or whatever it was he said, right? Like, I don't think he posted that saying I'm checking with everybody to make sure
he did
I'm
a follow-up tweet that says he's learned a lot about communion since then.
Right. Yeah.
So like, here's the thing. Like, I really like Lecrae. Like,
Yeah.
I want to learn from him about business and all this stuff. I would love to sit down with him and go, what happened?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
I want, but because me and him are fighting the same war, and I don't want my battle scars to turn me into what he is now. Right. So, because I'm fighting the Christian media complex, the Christian movie complex, right?
yes.
With lore. And I don't want whatever's happened to him to happen to me. And I want to build lore so that the temptations that Lecrae had to go through, other artists don't.
Yeah.
Like, that's why I'm building it. And so I really do. He might not think that my post might have been a jab at him, and he might have mocked me and tried to get another jab.
Because you guys had a conversation. Tell the audience about that.
Well,
like
he
you guys
responded
on Twitter, like there was a little back and forth.
No, I didn't really respond much.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw somewhere
but
that
he responded to me and said,
okay.
You got the reach of a wide receiver, because I took a screenshot, and then he took I took a screenshot. By the way, I took a screenshot of a video in which his head was down several times throughout that video, and that's where I was like, is he wrestling with this? And then he took a screenshot, I guess, of me kissing my wife with my eyes closed, and was like, made like the same assumptions, but it wasn't a screenshot, it was a photo. I took a screenshot of several that happened several times there. But anyway, so I didn't really respond because I didn't feel like he really wanted to have that. But I'm always open. I would love to. I mean, I'd fly out there to Georgia and hang out with him, but and like, my hope is that Lord does well, that Lecrae can make whatever movie he wants on it. Right. Like, well, so I'm not like, I don't see him as an enemy. I see his Marxism and critical race theory as an enemy.
Yes.
But I don't. I think you don't know who's. I mean, one of the things that's concerning is when he responded on my Facebook post, you just had this avalanche of like fanboys and simps that are just like, just attacking me because I just posted this about Lecrae, that are they just follow everything Lecrae does, and then
Right.
right, and it's not just that, it's like people are dropping their mixtape on it, because Lecrae responded, so maybe it's just like
Oh man.
so
Yeah.
the prayer is that he gets people around him that'll be that might not have financial incentive, that can be like, yeah, it's a bad idea.
Yeah. Well, but
You
let's
know,
talk about his Marxism and his critical
yeah,
race theory, because I
yeah,
mean, you obviously, like for you, a big part of what we've been talking about has been the Christian entertainment industrial complex, and how so you're actively in a fight against them right now,
hmm
and Lecrae was as well. But there was a moment sort of where he, perhaps in trying to flank the enemy, whatever, he got cut off from the rest of us, because, and it wasn't because necessarily of this industrial complex, but rather, I think, because he wanted to be able to speak to Black people, and the
yeah,
price that had to be paid for that was to become a Marxist. Like
yeah.
the way for him to get cred was to become a Marxist. Do you think there's something to that?
I think I think so. I think there's obviously hostility towards Calvinism and Reformed theology within the Black community, and I think Lecrae had a great position where he was at the top of his game. I don't think he's at the top
Mm,
of his game now. I think he was at the top of his game when he was at the top of his game, when he had the most support from the Christian community. I think that's when he could have figured out ways to get into the Black community. He could have started like shadow labels, that was bringing up different kinds of artists or
right.
more gospel music, and right, like just traditional sort of music, and that would speak well to that culture. Because there is a cultural divide. There's a huge difference
Sure.
between you know, and where I live in Newport News, there's literal train tracks that separate, the projects from the middle class white community, right? So like there's a huge cultural difference. I remember Chocolate Knox was telling me, he's like, how come we send people 3 years, in training to go overseas to China, but we don't train them to go across the streets,
Hmm.
right? So there's a huge cultural divide in where I'm from in Virginia, just across those train tracks, huge, massive, right? Like the churches are different, everything's different, and I think, um, he could have done everything he wanted and just remained as independent as possible.
Yes,
And I think that's really
but that would have
where
been a harder row to hoe,
it
right?
is a hard. I mean, the road he's been paving is hard anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, he still gets, uh, he's still fighting and paving that road.
So
Um,
I want to kind of go off on the side and then definitely come back, but um, it's relevant to our conversation. So we're talking about hip hop and Christian hip hop. There seems to be, like, I remember like 15 years ago, it seemed that there was this like a little explosion of Christian rappers who were all reformed, all out of California. But there's a definite reformed rap scene,
mhm,
and of all the, like, outside of the Franklin universe, well, first of all, the Franklin universe is, generally speaking, unappealing to the reformed. Um,
yeah, yes,
but like for whatever reason, hip hop seems to be a thing with all of these white boys, overwhelmingly white boys.
yeah.
Like, why is that? Why do you think hip hop has actually sort of caught some traction in the reformed world?
Yeah, because I think the poetic style of the writing required
Mm,
allows for exposition of scripture in a way that, like complex exposition of scripture in a way that, 4 words in a Hillsong song isn't gonna
yeah.
isn't
Although
gonna
I,
do.
I I have heard some pretty strange hip hop exposition where it's like,
Yeah,
dude,
for sure,
like,
for
just
sure.
put out some bars about your life on the street, because that's enough breaking
Yeah.
down Ephesians chapter 1.
Yeah, I've heard strange stuff, but I think, like, when you talk about, like, back in the day when it was, like, Shylin and Lecrae and, and like Timothy Brindle and all those guys that were really like doing like really reformed exposition. Shai Linne's The Doctrines of God, and like
Mm-hmm.
every song is a different doctrine or attribute of God or whatever. Like that was incredible work of poetry, right, in general. And I think it might have been Shai Linne that said that it allows for uh a type of exposition of scripture and music
Mm.
that no other art form has really allowed for. And I really think that's it. I think
Mm.
the amount of exposition you can get in a few bars of hip hop at a fast pace
Yeah.
is a lot more than you would get out of an Amazing Grace hymn.
Yeah.
Four verses.
That's interesting
So
because I mean, like, exposition is not only applied to scripture, but exposition is part of the narratival art of telling a story. But it's really only part of it. And I think it is interesting that there's this connection. But I also think it does reflect, without reflecting negatively on hip hop, it reflects negatively on the reformed inability to embrace narrative, to tell stories. Like, few of the best storytellers are reformed. And so we focus on exposition and never on narrative, because music generally is excellent at narrative. Hip hop
mhm.
is sweet because you can tell a story, but you can also just very clearly lay out a philosophy or a mode of thinking as well. But that's just the reformed. That's where they always gravitate. So I think it's interesting
I
that
think
mhm.
exposition was a word, but I think I could have used exegesis too.
Yes, yeah,
I think the poetic style of rap music allows for complex exegesis
yeah,
in a way that is wholly unique.
yeah,
And so I think it really took a musical form that was started by the world, and I think elevated it,
hmm,
right? Because suddenly you had um, what I think the Christian hip hop community did is they took that like Def Poetry Jam, like that real complex spoken word
yeah,
poetic style, and they upped it to actually mean something really important.
hmm,
And I think they took the best of like hip hop and spoken word, and they combined it in a way that just I don't think anybody's really done that well since.
yeah.
And
I
it
think there
goes,
was a lot that was novel, and
yeah,
unrecognized as
yeah,
novel, right?
yeah,
Because I think Christian artists generally get disrespected, and people want to make everything they do derivative. So
yeah.
when they don't do something that's derivative, when they do something, and derivative is fine, but when they do something that is actually new, that actually changes the game a little, people still reach for other little categories to put it under, because everyone knows a Christian wouldn't actually come up with something new and cool.
Right, right, right. So I think it was novel, and I think it
Hmm.
was unique, and I think it was a higher art. I compared it
Hmm.
to it was one of those reformational movements in history, I think,
Hmm.
where you just saw this really high level art. And I don't know why, I don't know what caused that to change. That's what I would like to figure out. If it was to sell more records, like I get it. It's like I want to sell more records, and I want to, one of the things Lecrae said was he wanted to be the best, in Jay-Z's category, right?
Hmm.
And he wanted to compete at that level. And I don't, if he wanted to make a dance album and make it, I don't think I ever
Right.
cared about that. I got it when he was talking about, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. I got it, but I don't think he had the Bonson Rushdoony worldview to really be able to articulate what it was that he was trying to do.
Right.
And so he got pieces of it somehow.
Yeah.
You listen to that 2008 talk, the 2013 talk that he gave at Liberty University, and
Hmm.
there's like he's hearing something somewhere. Like I don't know where he's getting that from, but he just needed to have a bunch of people around him to constantly
Yeah.
remind him, like that's the route. And so it reminds me of a time uh, that Rushdoony met with Pat Robertson, right? So Rushdoony has his private meeting.
I actually had no idea that it happened.
You didn't know about this? I've heard
me
about this
more.
from Joe Morecraft. He told me this story.
Okay.
So Joe Morecraft, it was like Joe Morecraft, Pat Robertson, Jerry Falwell, Rushdoony. I think maybe Bonson might have been there. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But they meet in a hotel lobby in Virginia Beach. Just secret meeting. And Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, they're doing the moral majority thing. And they are really into what Rushdoony's saying, right? Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, Rushdoony's still to this day throughout Liberty University, like their goal of Liberty University. And Jerry Falwell's a dispensationalist. And so still very highly influenced by these guys. And so they got to meet, and they wanted to work with Rushdoony and everything. And Rushdoony said, look, you can, if you're going to keep your charismatic stuff, and you're not going to hold on to our reformed doctrine, then nobody's going to remember the moral majority in 10 years. And they went their own ways. And now nobody remembers the moral majority anymore. But suddenly there's this big resurgence of like Rushdoony books, right? And Bonson and all this. So massive.
But on the other hand, Liberty is huge, and none of the reformed, Rushdoonian universities are of any size. Anyway,
that's absolutely true. But
yes,
Liberty never had the reformed tradition anyway. So I went there. It was I describe it as like a evangelical megachurch.
Yeah.
But
Liberty's in some danger,
the youth ministry.
That's another topic.
It's the youth. I mean, they built like ski slopes at their university. Yeah. It's like a youth ministry, but college.
Well, it's really interesting that you bring up people like Rushdoony, and we had a conversation here on the channel with Jason Farley recently about theonomy and reconstruction, etc. But one of the difficult things, and I think this would have been a difficulty for Lecrae if he did indeed face this quandary. One of the difficult things for once you embrace a sort of a multi-generational strategy, right? We're going to be building this thing. Then you look around at the various areas that you can influence, and I mean, rappers who have really made it, they reach a certain age, they start producing, they start blessing other artists, and this stuff starts coming out. Just in other ways, they become just little kings of their artistic area, and Lecrae, of course, never was as big as somebody like Jay-Z, and I know that he has done some of that sort of work, but when you start thinking multi-generationally like that, you do end up sort of you have to come to terms with where you are in that timeline, right? If you become a part of, well, this is how the world is doing things, and if I compromise enough, then I can participate in a certain way, I can get accelerated, then you can kind of borrow their timeline, right? But if you actually decide, well, we're going to build this thing, and I am going to be a Christian producer, and I've established my chops as an artist, and now after all the success, I can now go out and start building kingdom, like for real, blessing others, then you have to realize, what? Actually, maybe my son is going to be the one who's going to be bigger than I am, and maybe I'm actually going to be sort of limited, and I will die before there's a Christian rapper who's as big as Jay-Z.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, but
that's really hard to accept.
Yeah, but when it happens, it's called nepotism or white privilege, right? Like,
tell me more.
Like, huh?
Just tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Yeah, no, because you're talking about inheritance and blessing that's being passed down, right? And so when we look at we people who are successful, and the response from the leftists are, well, that's just white privilege, or he had a rich father, and it's like, okay.
Yeah, that was the plan all along.
Yeah. What about Jay-Z and Beyonce, whose daughter Blue Ivy got an Emmy at 6 years old? Right. That's not privilege, right? Like that's privilege.
Yeah,
right.
And that's what they should be doing, and not just with their own kids.
Of course, like or the Ball family, right? LeVar Ball trained all of his sons to be pro athletes.
Yeah,
that's amazing. Like that's Will Smith does the same thing for his family, right? Like we're an entertainment family. But it's the work that Will Smith had to do is not the same level of work that Will Smith's kids have to do.
Right.
And
And that's the plan, right?
Yeah,
All you know,
that's the point.
we end up planning on being flashes in the pan. That's it,
Yeah.
right? It's like I have to have this apex of success, and that's how it works. It's like no, and you know there are certain doors that were closed for Lecrae,
Hmm.
and that's undeniable. But what he
Hmm.
never did was pivot into the doors that were open,
Yeah. Yeah, I
right? And
think so.
decide, okay, I can build foundations upon which generations of artists could stand. That didn't
Right.
happen.
Right. Well, that's how we think. It's like even in the Christian movie industry, it's like I just need one good Christian movie.
Right.
And so you have these people who they'll invest, 30 million, $10 million in a Christian movie. Or several Christian movies, right? They'll invest millions in several Christian movies. No one thinks, why don't I just build a platform that can make all the
Yeah.
movies?
Right.
Which is
Right.
what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And trying to sometimes when I do pitches with investors, you get the impression that it'd be way easier just to pitch a movie to them than
Yeah.
it
Oh,
would be.
of course. Because
Yeah.
and you're probably not going to love hearing this, but I'm sure in your darkest moments, you've had this thought anyway, and that is, listen, like I mean, you guys can be awesome from the beginning, but it's not going to be as big as what your kid's going to do,
No, that's right.
right?
Absolutely.
And
Right.
hopefully it's with LoorTV itself, right?
Right.
And the thing, and 100 years from now, there could be a LoorTV, and that's the LoorTV you were always shooting for,
Right.
right? So
Or
people should
maybe
be
it's
getting in
not
on that. But
Maybe it's not Lore
yeah,
TV.
exactly,
And maybe, but everybody cops our model, and then
right.
suddenly the entire industry has changed, and it's easier for
That
everyone.
that is something that more people need to shoot for. More people need to shoot for being footnotes in history books.
Yeah.
How enormous is that? Like the fact that you actually got the whole reason these guys were amazing was because of Joe Blow and Johnny Smith. Here's a
Yeah.
little footnote about them. That is huge to be
Yeah.
such a man
I was
that you
watching
ended up in a footnote.
I was watching a documentary about the Palm Pilot
Uh-huh.
stuff, right? And so there
Huh.
were people that wanted to take Palm Pilot more into like a mobile phone sort of aspect, and Palm didn't want to do it, so they left the company and started Handspring. And then Handspring created the mobile phone ability, and then they
Mhm.
eventually created what was the Trio or whatever. And so they were really just trying to get the Trio to work on Apple computers. So they go and speak to Steve Jobs, and Steve Jobs hates Palm, he hates Hands, he hates the whole thing. And so Steve Jobs gets on the whiteboard and he writes the Apple computer, and he says music, movies, television, it's all going to go to the Apple computer. And the guy from Handspring gets up there and puts his phone up there, and he says, it's all going to go to the phone. And he says, people don't leave their home with your Apple computer. And then the next thing Steve Jobs kicks him out or whatever, and next thing you know, there's the iPhone. Like,
Well,
right? So
yeah.
Handspring's like the footnote.
Yes.
But if it
Yeah.
wasn't for them and that meeting with Steve Jobs, the whole world got changed because of that.
Yeah.
Like in that, and the documentary looked at them as the
Yeah.
innovators and the ones who started that. And then
And really, but
real quick, another good
yeah, yeah.
documentary on that is phenomenal. Gary DeMar recommended it to me. It's called General Magic.
Mm.
General Magic tells a story of this company that was trying to build a smartphone with like emojis and everything back in the 90s before internet existed. It was insane. And then turns out that all those people that worked for that company, it completely failed because it was way too early. It wasn't that it was a bad idea. It was just too early. The infrastructure didn't
Yeah.
exist. And people were, I think like AOL came out and people just started going into AOL and they didn't even think about phones at that time. But anyway, it turns out that the two people in that room that started General Magic, one went to go work with Steve Jobs and develop the iPhone. The other guy went to go and started Android. Both in the
Wow.
same room.
Yeah. It's
So they
amazing
were
how
early at the
often that
time.
happens. I mean, it really is. Like, that's the way the world works, and we
Yeah.
never think about that. We just think, okay, well, if I start doing my thing, next thing you know, I'll be, there's either the top of the game or there's nothing,
Right.
right? I either fail or I'm the one that everybody knows, I'm on the marquee. And that's not how the world works. And if we embrace that, we could actually build something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right, man. I think that's, figuring out how you can build institutions so that your children don't have to have the same problems as you did to be able to
Mm,
succeed is, I mean, that's what the Bible talks about when it talks about blessings and inheritances. And
yeah.
I was just reading the other day when Jacob stole the inheritance. Right? And God still counted that. Like, right?
Yeah.
Like, is Jacob I loved and Esau I hated, and Esau's the one that got the inheritance
Yeah.
stolen from
I
him.
would actually say that Jacob did the right thing, but that's a whole other episode.
Oh, I'd be interested to hear
Yeah.
that because I was reading that passage and I was it was
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so it's really I mean, like, it's all throughout scripture,
Yeah.
this leaving stuff for your children. And I think sometimes we just think about that in terms of money or cash in the bank to pass down to the kids. And it's way more than that.
Oh, yeah.
Dirty Jobs is a phenomenal explanation of that too, where you have these guys who are millionaires and they're like shoveling poop.
Yeah.
And they're like doing this for their children.
Yeah.
And so their children will be able to either take over the business if they want it, or at
Yeah.
least have, the ability to do what they want. And they're not the most college educated people.
Right.
Or they are college educated and they just figured out this was an easier way to make money.
But
So
the way you work and the way you think are far more important inheritances than money, right? And so you get people like Shaq saying he's not going to give any money to his kids, and I think that's a quite radical approach and not necessary. But Shaq sees something real, which is that the most important thing I can pass on is how to work and really to know what is good, right?
mhm,
Well, so we the reason we got off on this is that we were talking about how Lecrae probably missed an opportunity to pivot, and really, in a sense, I think he sold his inheritance for pottage when he went after the BLM and the Marxist stuff. That being said, and as we sort of approach the end of our conversation, I would be really curious to hear. So we both we love Lecrae.
mhm.
God bless him, and may he do great things for the kingdom. But what would you say if you had the chance? Lecrae's in the room here with us, and after we see this evidence that really he's not attached to the church and the church not attached to him, and what's going on, like,
Mhm.
what would you say to him to encourage him, to call him to repentance, whatever it is?
Yeah, I think I would tell him, return home.
Mm,
It's not like he doesn't know uh reformed tradition. But also I don't think he can succeed the way he wants to without being grounded in a good church.
right.
I
Well, it's
like I
either that or sell his soul, right?
Yeah,
And
well,
I
yeah, okay.
suppose that immediately takes that out of what he wants,
Right,
right?
yeah,
But I
we
mean,
don't
he
talk
can
about
have
hell
great
as much as
success one way or the other. Yeah, sorry,
yeah,
go
we don't
ahead.
talk about as hell as much as we should, but
Mm,
for sure, like that. But just on a practical level, you need the church to be your support and your anchor. And you need to have a solid pastor, and you need to have those sort of things and accountability from people who don't have financial interest.
mhm,
When Reach Records starts a Reach Records sort of funded church, right? Like, that's not there's a financial conflict there. That, because my question would be, well, would the elders of that church uh tell Lecrae to step down and not do that stuff anymore?
mm,
Right? Like, and if it's a church that's, and a sort of functional arm of the record label, or ministry outreach of the record label, they're all one and the same. It's dangerous.
yes.
And so I would just say, one, find a good church even with a pastor that doesn't even understand rap music, right? But that just has your soul in mind. I think that's really important. And and abandon the critical race theory Marxist stuff. Just abandon it, throw it away. Like,
Yeah.
like everything that he wants to do, from 2008 in terms of like fixing poor inner city Black communities. There's a specific part in that talk that he gave at Liberty University where he talks about having a biblical worldview of economics, having a
Mm.
biblical worldview of law. Like he specifically references those two things. Well, what he's doing now is not it. He's abandoned that, right? Like all those sort of principles that he needs to be able to build the infrastructure and institutions long term that he wants. He has to go back to that. Yeah, like he's not going to get there. Or it's like, it's like Pat Robertson and Rushdoony.
Yeah.
Like it's you're going to be forgotten. And I know like his album. I mentioned this. Like his album got number 1 on iTunes a few weeks ago, but I don't think getting number 1 on iTunes is as big of a deal as it was 10 years ago.
Right. No,
Because
far from it.
not a lot of people buy albums on iTunes anymore, and so pretty much anyone with a pretty decent following on YouTube, subscribers, for example, can get a number 1 album on iTunes, just depending on the day they drop it, right? So, so I don't think I don't think he's as memorable. I don't think most of like if you talk to like the young kids at New St. Andrews, probably wouldn't have a big
That's right.
connection to Lecrae anymore, right? I don't
No.
think a majority of younger Christians know much about Lecrae anymore.
Right. And of course he has a following, and that can create something of an echo chamber inevitably.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
But I think there's no denying that he's not as relevant as he used to be. And that is precisely because he went after relevance in the way that he did. Right. What he could have had was a legacy and a voice and an ongoing conversation from the Reformed Church out into the church broadly. Instead, he sort of just tried to go around the church and maybe back in. I'm not
Yeah.
not sure exactly what, but
Yeah.
the fact is he's embraced.
Another thing is, I believe, and I might have the title wrong,
Mm.
but or the company wrong, but I believe he sold Reach Records to Sony.
Mm. Right.
And I don't know what sort of influence and power they have over them, but I'll tell you, PureFlix sold to Sony too. Right? So you have this evil supervillain
Yeah.
that's buying up all these Christian media companies. And I know for a fact, PureFlix movies have been rejected since the Sony takeover based on the content. So I can only imagine if they're doing that to PureFlix, they have to be
Yes.
doing that to him or whatever music group bought him is probably doing
And
the
that's
same
exactly
thing.
the contradiction I'm talking about, where what you end up with is, well, you think, okay, this is the next evolution, this is the bigger platform, this is the greater voice. No, this is how they shut you up.
Right. That's right. So I mean, we have those discussions too. Like, what if a venture capitalist bank comes to us and
Yeah.
says, "Here's a pile of money." That's a problem because that comes with strings.
Yeah.
And it's harder. It's harder to do the work that we're doing with as little money as we. I mean, we've only raised $500,000. Right.
Mm.
So you're talking about for a platform that is going to hopefully make multi-million-dollar movies. $500,000 is nothing.
Ain't nothing. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, any Christian movie that gets theater distribution is magnitudes more than just the $500,000 we've raised. And the work is hard. It'd be so much
Yep.
easier just to hire full-time devs and have a product up in 2 weeks than it is to work with part-time guys, right? So
Well,
it's just, it'd be it's faster, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But there's also the option too. Well, we don't have a lot of money, so we could just hire some devs in India to just knock some junk out, right? And so they're like, I know exactly what this fight is. It's a fight to to put it out as fast as you can, but also
Mhm.
at the highest quality that you can. And so there, there's this constant battle on, multiple fronts. And our we're just like, let's just be faithful with what we have, and
Yep.
do what we can at the pace that God has for it, and just go from there. We've already know that the other companies, whether it's VidAngel or PureFlix or whatever, they're paying attention to us. We've already had emails.
Yeah. Oh, of
so
course.
so and we haven't even really done much yet. So
No.
obviously we're doing something.
Yeah.
So it's just, we're just going to keep on doing what we're doing, and pushing through, and hopefully our children's children will benefit from it.
Yeah. Well, now you're already taking some subscribers and doing some things with Lure. So why don't you tell folks about what Lure is up to
Well, we
currently?
haven't started subscriptions yet.
Okay.
So we said we haven't launched yet, but currently our current state is we are doing user experience walkthroughs and demo testing of the actual site. But we haven't launched yet.
Okay.
But let me just explain what Lore is,
Hmm.
since we've kind of talked
Yeah.
about it the whole time, as if people know. But basically, what we're doing is, right now, if you have Netflix or Disney Plus, your monthly subscription is funding Stranger Things, right? You're funding The Mandalorian, right? But you're also funding, Cuties, right? Because that money that you spend for your subscription is pooled into a content pool, right? This is the
Yeah.
amount of money from all the subscriptions that we're going to fund films and TV shows. Now, you don't have any say in that. There's only 7 people in the world that have that say, right? Like the head of Disney, ABC, Fox, Hulu. That's all one, like that's those people, that same company. And then you have, Netflix and Paramount, and which is CBS, and right. So, and then you have Universal, Peacock. So there's only a few people that are creating all the streaming options for all the world, with your money. And so our model gets them out of the way, and we allow the monthly subscribers to spend the portion of their monthly subscription funding the content, movies, and TV shows that they want to see. And so because of that, we don't have the Christian movie boundaries
Mm.
and categories, because the artist is free to pitch freely to the consumer, and the consumer is free to fund it or not. So it's a free market system. And then once the content is funded or made, it'll stream on the platform for everybody to see whether they funded it or not. So that's the basic model of it. And so we have a lot of excitement from artists. I mean, Emmy winners, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, like, not, people who are top of their game, but just keeping their head down low because they got golden handcuffs on, that are just, really excited about what we're doing and have offered to help and do all sorts of stuff to get us going. And so there's content side, and then of course the development side is happening, and we have same thing in the development side. We got people work for Google and Apple and all these like top level sort of places, and they're keeping their head down low, and with their golden handcuffs on too. And so we hope to be able to free developers and free artists to really be able to make the content that they want, and not have to worry about um, how they're going to provide for their families and stuff like that. And so just so that's sort of the thing, is we just want to create a platform for artists to be free of cancel culture and not have to fear about the ramifications of that, because as long as um, you can get another job, you can't ever really be canceled.
Yeah. Right. Well, and
so
another way of describing what you're describing is to say that this is a platform where the people of God, where Christians can enable, can empower, can engage artists.
that's right. Yeah. I mean, if lore existed in the music form, I don't think that Lecrae would have had the same temptations,
Right.
right? Or filmmakers would have had the same temptations. And so, if I can make more money doing whatever I want, with the freedom that I want, everybody's going to choose that one.
Yeah.
And I think it's possible to do that. Like, that's the, throughout the history, we've seen that decentralization sort of stuff, right? So, um, you know, Uber, the idea that Uber would upend the entire taxi cab industry would be insane. Like 10 years ago, you're like, that's insane. But it did. And just be clear, I think liberals are way more post-mill in their investing than conservatives are, because liberals see the idea before there's any revenue and go, that idea is a winner. It's a world changer. It's not just a money maker. It's a world changer. And although of course, obviously they're doing it for money, but I think they're way more on the vision. And then the conservatives get in there and they want to invest in Uber, but the price is already too high. They already got in late, right? And so what we need to really do is I think Red Balloon's doing a great job with this. Fight Laugh Feast conference, they had a CEO lunch, and just really get people who have worked hard and now have some money to invest in stuff and ideas for their children. Just really, let's start working on, like, what does a biblical worldview approach to investing look like? How do we not bury our talons in the sand, right? Like, what's the, what does God want us to do with that? And start thinking like the liberals in the sense of being post-mill and changing the world and making the world
and I think it's really easy for Christians, Christian families, post-mill families, to get caught up in they're being a family, they're worshiping, going to church, and so we're living our lives, and and the liberals are just, the only thing they're concerned with is there's no God in heaven. This the sky is an iron dome, and we're going to try to make the world as good as it can be now, and that's it, and then we'll die. So there's no distraction. We have this this distraction, except it's not. It's good stuff. Here's the thing, though. The encouragement I want to give to Christians, and that is that C.S. Lewis talks about how Christians should have.
Hold on one second. Sorry. What?
Yeah. Mute. I'm going to continue my. Oh wait, are you back? Are you back?
Yeah, thanks.
I was about to embark on this enormous rant, dude.
Yeah, but she was asking you if I was still on the podcast. I was like, well, you're obviously not watching.
We're getting off shortly.
Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, so C.S. Lewis talks about how Christians ought to have less money than their social peers, right? Because you're giving more, right? So if you're a college professor and then your non-Christian friend is a college professor, you're a plumber, your non-Christian friend is a plumber, you're going to have less money because you're being more generous. The same thing goes to time, right? Christians have to, they need to engage. You can't just obviously you're more busy than the pagans in San Francisco and LA. Obviously, you've got your family, you've got your community. Also, get after building culture. Also, do this, do that. Like you have less time. You have less money than the non-Christians and you have less time than the Christians You still got to get after it.
Yes. Yeah, I do. I'm with you.
Well, we were reaching a natural close. So now that we've had Laura come in and say, hey, what's going on? Let's go ahead and end this recording. It's been awesome talking to you, my dude.
Yeah, dude. We should do this more often.
We will. All right. So long, everybody.
Aí sim é homem de verdade, não é esses troços do grupo não, essas carcaças velhas UOL, fim de carreira.
Cadê você, profeta, autarquia? Hein? Pedrada no inferno, fala comigo aí, matador de demônio. Hein?